the Inspection Committee, which is a quorum. So you can start the meeting and get going, and then if others join in at that time.
Sounds good. All right, we will call this meeting of the Truck Inspector Advisory Committee to order at 10:06 a.m. on July 20th. We'll start with a roll call.
Let me go ahead and call, since I have them. Let me go ahead and call here. Or do you want? Yeah, hold on a second. Yeah, go ahead and do it, Amber. Amber's going to do the roll call.
Okay. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Lee Warren.
Here.
Sean Emmerich.
Here.
Steve Reinhardt. Here. Robert Dane. Barbara Evans. Mike Morgan. Dave Motley.
He's on the call.
Okay. Scott Reagan.
Here.
Doyle Williamson.
I believe Doyle's on the call too. Doyle? He was. Shows that he's here.
Dave Motley's here.
Yes, sir.
Doyle's muted, it looks like.
He's muted, but he's on the call. Okay. Yeah. Hey, Lee, Vanessa wants to make a couple of housekeeping announcements real quick, if we can do that before we move on to the next agenda item.
Okay, go ahead.
Hey, everyone. Hold on, Tony's going to mute. Okay, well, this is going to be relevant. Okay, Tony did not mute. I apologize. Okay, so that was a really relevant example, which is everyone should stay on mute unless you want to speak. Because with this many people, there's just a lot of background noise and feedback. We experienced this during broker lure. So if you can just stay muted until you want to speak, it works pretty well. There is now a raise hand function. If you're trying to get your voice in and you can't, you'll see it down on your toolbar. It's a little hand, it says raise your hand. You can also feel free to just speak, but if you feel like you need to raise your hand because there's a bunch of people speaking and you want to make a comment, go ahead and do that. And then finally, just as a reminder, let's only use the chat function when you're dealing with technical issues. So if you're having trouble hearing, you just need something administrative. Thank you. Things like that, because we don't want to have an open meetings issue where we have these side conversations going on that the public doesn't have access to, and that also cannot be recorded in the same way that this meeting can. So just those are the top three. Mute when you're not speaking. You can use that raise your hand function if you feel you need to, but you can also just speak up. And let's try and use that chat solely for, hey, I'm having this issue kind of things, and not substantive discussion of what we're talking about in the meeting. Thank you.
All right. With that being said, we will go on to item number 2, discussion and possible action to excuse committee member absences, if any.
Okay. Can everyone hear me all right? I just got some a headset, and I just want to make sure everyone can hear me. Okay. I did get, just for the committees, so you're aware, I did get an email from Barbara Evans this weekend that she was not going to attend. Her, I think most of you know, her husband had some health issues and has for a while, and he's been in hospice. He passed last week, so she's obviously dealing with some family issues, so she will not be, that's why she won't be here. But I just wanted to let you guys know that in terms of your motion to excuse absences.
Entertain a motion to excuse any absences.
I'd like to make the motion.
Who is that?
That's Sean Emmerich making a motion to excuse Barbara Evans.
Okay, motion made by Sean. Do I hear a second?
This is Scott. I second.
Second by Scott. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye or yes.
Aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Motion passed. Item number 3, ratification of minutes of the April 13, 2020 meeting. Tony?
Yeah, so the meeting was, or the minutes have been posted online for a while, so I don't know if anyone has any issues with any corrections or anything. If not, you guys could go ahead and move forward with ratifying them.
Okay. Anybody have any adjustments to be made to those minutes? Otherwise, if not, entertain a motion to ratify.
I'll make a motion. This is Sean Emmerich. We make a motion. We accept the minutes.
Thank you, Sean. Here's a second.
Second, Stephen.
Second by Steve. And minutes don't need a vote, so we're good there. Number 4, general comments from visitors on non-agenda items. Do I hear any general comments from visitors on non-agenda items? Okay, hearing none. Before we move on to number 5, Tony, just want to make sure Doyle, it looks like he's here. His mute is off, but it's not working.
Okay.
So if we can keep an eye on that, if he wants to make a comment or something, that we make sure we get to him.
Okay, you said his mute, like he's not able to speak is what you're saying.
Correct. According to what he's stating is that the mute is off, but it's not working.
Okay, it looks like Mike Morgan just joined the meeting.
Welcome, Mike. All right, so we will move on to item number 5, reports from subcommittees. Education Subcommittee.
Okay.
No new news since our last meeting. We are actively trying to get going on the I guess task force on getting the SOP class started, so we can get that going.
Okay, perfect. Standards of practice. Sorry, go ahead, Tony.
Steve, is there a meeting scheduled for you guys in the future?
I knew you were going to ask that. I didn't know right offhand if we had picked a date.
I thought there was one scheduled for this Friday, actually.
Was it, Jennifer, was it this? Oh, yes, this Friday morning. It's
Or no,
right.
I'm sorry, it's the 29th is what I've been told. So
Yes.
it's next Friday, right?
Yeah, I have back-to-back
That
Zoom
next-
conferences,
whatever that
Zoom
is.
meetings. Yes, I remember that one. So it is scheduled for next Friday.
Next Wednesday.
Let me get this straight.
No.
I thought I had it.
So education has a meeting next week, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's next. We have it on our calendar as next Wednesday on the 29th.
I've got it on the 24th, I thought.
You know what? There has been a lot of confusion about this date. But I know that Steve preferred a Friday. And I think that's what
We had talked about a Friday because I had a Zoom conference with ICC at 11 o'clock. And you made mention that it wouldn't be that long. We could do it and be on and off before then on Friday the 24th. Does that sound right?
Well, we will. Why don't we do this after this meeting? We will circle back around with the education subcommittee and get a date certain and post it on our website and send it out to the rest of the committee as well.
So, Tony, I'm looking at Steve, the last email exchange we had. Ooh, was for the 24th. I think our
Yes.
calendar just might be wrong.
I just want to make sure the rest of the subcommittee can attend on that.
Yes. Well, the last email that Jennifer and I had was Friday the 24th at 9:30 a.m.
Right.
All right, well, if you guys can circle back to that so everybody can make sure they can be on that.
Yes, we will do that.
We will move on to 5B, Standards and Practice Subcommittee, please.
Okay, this is Sean Emmerich. We met 3 times since the last full committee meeting. We've gone over structural, electrical, plumbing, and HVAC. We've kind of agreed upon some changes in some of those sections and circling back around to kind of clarify some of the revisions we're looking at in the plumbing, HVAC, that we meet again on August 3rd at 9 o'clock. So we're making pretty good headway through all the standards and hope to reach our goal of having everything done by the end of this year.
Perfect.
And the thought just to add on that is that the subcommittee will present all the changes at one time, so we're not piecemealing those rules as they go on. We have kind of this is a recommendation from the subcommittee. The committee can then weigh in on that, and then we'll move forward with any changes based on those as well to the commission.
Sounds good.
Yeah. The only thing to add on to that is if anybody in the public or anybody you're talking to wants to have any input, encourage them to jump on during our meetings, because we're taking input from everybody.
All right. All right, before we move on, number 6, Doyle stated that he called back and made a couple of comments on the Education Subcommittee meeting date and time, but he doesn't know if anybody can hear me. I did not hear him, but there was a few people talking. Okay. Doyle, are you still on the call? Are you still called in? Can you try talking? Okay. I still don't hear Doyle.
I believe that's Delora. Is it?
It's Doyle. It's Doyle.
Is it
Williams.
Doyle? Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
And maybe just a mic issue on his end that he needs to toggle the volume of his mic.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and move on to number 6, staff reports, executive division.
Sure, I'll start this. This is Chelsea. And Tony, you may have much more substantive additions to this, but I wanted y'all to know that we had made a decision to remain remote for our August commission meeting. That's simply just because of kind of the cases rising in Austin and there not being any real sign of change towards safety. So we will continue as we are to continue these meetings and then our commission meeting remotely, at least for the August meeting. As an agency, we are also remaining primarily remote. Several weeks ago now, we provided an opportunity for staff on a very limited basis to volunteer to return to the office. And there's a few people who are doing that, but we remain day in and day out primarily remote. The exception to that is the processing of mail and the processing of money that comes in the mail. That is really the only thing that we cannot do remotely. And we're doing that on a limited basis. We continue to check mail only once a week so that we allow the germs, potential germs, to die before we ask our staff to touch that mail. And so that's a modified process just given this pandemic that will remain in place until it's clear that we can return to our daily mail check safely. You'll hear in this meeting that there's been progress made on the inspector education rules. We're excited about that. I know that has been a long time coming, but that will be a topic of discussion later on in the meeting. Also, just a few small things. We've really, I have solidified our executive team. We could continue to make a few hires and tweaks in our leadership team at Trek, and we have really finalized that. I don't know if you've met our budget director, Renata Williams, who started during this pandemic, but very excited to have her on board. We've really split out we have had a staff services division, staff and support services division that was HR and finance, and I've split that into two. So now HR will report, and so will the budget director. So that necessitated a few name changes to our divisions, but our mission in doing so is that the names of our divisions would be clear on their face as to what they do: finance, enforcement, education, licensing, that sort of thing. So you may hear fewer acronyms that you don't know what they mean, because we're trying to limit those. I think that's all I have. Have I missed anything, Tony? You're muted, and your mic's down. Turn your mic down.
That's what it is. I'm sorry. I wasn't muted with my mic. No, I don't believe so. I think you got everything. Outside of just one more thing, executive related, I guess, and this will be talked about later when we talk about the education rules, is that Vanessa and I have been in contact with the governor's office about the education rules, and that's on the plate for you guys to discuss any changes to those rules moving forward. But they have reached out to us, and we have talked to them. They're waiting for this committee meeting to move forward on any sort of final action.
Yeah, exactly right. That's it from execs. So
yeah, that's all for us.
Lee is on mute, but I'm guessing he's saying we'll move on to enforcement.
Yep, I did. Sorry, I was trying to cut down on the background noise.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Malloy, if you want to go with the enforcement division, please.
All right, good. Good morning. Mike Malloy, Director of Truck Enforcement.
I'm going to interrupt for just a second. That's another staff announcement. We should I don't know if we've made clear in this committee. Mike Malloy has been named to be our Director of Enforcement, with Mark Moore moving into the Deputy General Counsel position. So I did just want to make sure y'all knew that. You continue to be the liaison right now, right?
Yes.
For inspectors.
That may change in the future, but for now, it's going to keep it as is. So the reports before you, there's 5 formal disciplinary actions that have been done since we last met. Does anyone have any questions? They're, for the most part, they're pretty straightforward.
I have a question on that, Mike. I actually have a couple of them.
Yeah.
One on, make sure I'm unmuted. Yeah. On the first one, 200199, the failed to use current inspection report form. Obviously, that's a pretty black and white issue, but it's from 2 years ago, from back in over 2 years ago, back in 2018. So one of the questions I have is there a statute of limitations on a time frame for people to file a complaint on an inspector?
4 years from the date from the date of the action that occurred. So basically, the 4 years from the day they do the inspection. So.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. My second question relates to 201003, the perform an inspection for a buyer in a negligent or incompetent manner regarding electrical. In that agreed order and the findings of fact, it's regards to an inspector who did not test the 220 volt dryer outlet. I'm trying to get a better understanding of that, because this was actually brought up to me by another inspector, and then I've talked to a couple of inspectors about some of the details of this too, and I'm really kind of looking for some clarification. I don't recall anywhere in the standards where it says we're supposed to test a 220 volt dryer outlets or actually test any outlets for that matter.
Well, I mean, you usually do for circuit testing, correct?
I do, but the standards don't actually say you have to test the outlets. I realize that most inspectors will test the 110 outlets with a standard plug tester. And I guess you can call that an accepted practice and get along that way, but the standards don't actually tell us that we have to test the outlets. They say we have to report deficiencies in outlets, but don't actually say we have to test the outlets. So that's kind of issue number one there. For me, issue number two then becomes the 220s for the dryers. And you can wave one of the sniffers, electric sniffers around it and find out if there's power. But if there's power on one side, are you verifying there's power on the other side, you know, on both legs? And that's just verifying there's power. That's not even testing polarity or if the ground's connected or whatnot. So the only way, and even the wand would be considered kind of specialized equipment, plus anything beyond that would still be considered specialized equipment. So I'm kind of curious on Trek's stance here because I'm a little confused as to our requirement to test 220 outlets.
I can talk with the attorney that handled the case. I mean, I imagine that we confirm this with another inspector that this is typically what's done. But
Okay.
Sure.
Well, then
I mean,
that kind of brings up.
Going forward, you guys don't test 220s or outlets or 110 outlets or.
I test outlets.
You just visually look at them and see if they're cracked. You just say there's some issues with them or what?
Now I test the actual 110s, and I think that would be, I think most people would consider that an accepted practice to test the 110s with just a standard plug tester. You know, $7, I don't know if I would qualify that as specialized equipment, you know, which is what those little plug testers cost. But those little plug testers not only tell you if there's power, it tells you if the hot and the neutralizer are reversed, the ground's connected, the hot and the ground are reversed, any number of those little details. Yeah. But you start talking about dryer outlets, and that's a little more complicated issue. There's a whole second leg there. Plus, the dryer outlets have 4 or 5 different configurations if you want to have an actual plug tester to do it. Otherwise, you're sticking probes in there to do that. And the probes, you know, to test polarity and everything else, that would qualify as specialized equipment. But my other issue here that you kind of touched on is if you guys are touching base on a questionable item with an inspector, previously that was supposed to go to the enforcement committee, which we have since dissolved. As a result of that dissolution of the enforcement committee, the directive
we never went to the enforcement committee for that. We just had an expert on the committee that we went to.
On what committee?
Just in general, the inspector committee itself. Like we used Brad. We used like Brad previously. He wasn't always on the inspector committee, but he was on the committee when we used him as a source.
And I do remember that, but if memory also serves, when we dissolved the enforcement subcommittee, the directive at that point was that any of those questions that come up go to whomever is either the chair or the vice chair at that time. The biggest reason being is that when these things come out in the public and people start shooting emails and making calls going, what in the world is this for? We have some idea as to what's going on and we have an answer before we get sideswiped with one of these issues.
And I understand that. And I don't know if we consulted anyone or not on this case. So.
Okay. So then my concern there is we're fining an inspector for doing something that the standards do not require.
So what happens when 220s don't work and then someone calls you up and says that? You just tell them it's not part of the standards. You need to call the electrician.
Require specialized equipment.
So that's the opt-out that you use for 220s, just so I know going forward. Okay.
Correct. That's part of the departure provision for it.
But if 110 it pops up and it's not working and the inspector doesn't catch that, then that's considered negligent.
No.
Now, it used to be years ago, there used to be a verbiage that said random sampling. And I don't remember where I got that, but I do remember specifically something saying random sampling, and that's since gone away. I've always
if
tested
that was
every
part of the
outlet.
standards, or if that was just basically how you practiced it. You know, kind of like the same thing for roofing. You don't note every deficiency on the roof, but if you notice like a couple issues, then those are specifically pointed out.
Right. Now, some of this I've already talked with standards that we need to look at this particular aspect of that so that this doesn't happen again. But my concern is the inspector in question actually cited the specific departure provision that he used for that, but still got fined. So a lot of inspectors use these disciplinary actions as a roadmap of what not to do.
I know. I've been in meetings where they're bringing them up. So right, duly noted. I will talk to the attorney that took this case. So.
Okay. I believe Eddie had a comment that he wanted to speak to as well.
Yes, thank you. Back on the first point about the wrong form.
Yes, sir.
Is that an old one or is that a new one? Because we've been using those forms for 5 years now almost.
He was using it. I have to go look at the facts, but I believe he was using a 7-3 form in 2018.
Okay, so it's 2 year. Okay.
I mean, if you review the order itself, it sets out the timeline. So.
All right, and on the last thing, on the 220, generally I don't expect it because generally it's got a plug into it. It's attached to a dryer, so I don't unplug things. There's no problem. Just so you'll know. Makes sense?
I understand.
Okay.
I'm going to talk to the attorney about it. So.
All right, thank you.
Is there anything further?
Anybody have anything else?
This is Sean Emmerich. Yeah, it's something we'll look at in the standards because we're going over the electrical right now. I'm trying to go through here, but I mean, I know there's some requirements to verify proper wiring. So yeah, we'll look at that and see if we won't need to add in to the standards specifically what devices we need to use to test that.
Okay.
And maybe I think it would be something that I would want to know if that outlet was improperly, it was not working or not. But
yeah, I agree. I agree, and I think most inspectors use that, but I think there is some clarification that might be made on verifying proper wiring at 240s or 220s.
Okay. Anybody else have anything for enforcement?
Lee, I think there's a comment from Doyle that we need to read into the record. I'm just trying to pull it up.
Okay. Doyle says if this is a visual inspection, use of any equipment constitutes specialized equipment. This includes a standard $7 plug tester. I think this is something, and Sean touched on this, I think this is something we really need to look at in the standards. And this is a perfect time to do it. I just have a concern that we have a colleague that was fined for something that, in my personal opinion and how I read the standards, he did not violate the standards. So that's my concern.
Yeah.
Lee, this is.
I mean, the standards are pretty vague. It just says deficiencies in receptacles. So I mean that can be taken.
Right. Was that Steve? I thought I heard was trying to say something.
Yes, and we've talked. I think that probably the gray area here is defining how it actually says deficiencies are in, you write up deficiencies in receptacles. So the question is, to what extent or what is the scope of inspecting a receptacle? Is it just visual of the receptacle on the cover, or is it the polarity, the grounding, and everything of the wiring between there and the panel? So it's kind of a scope issue that's never been addressed, but it was assumed 120 and below we did with a standard tester, and the 240s, I can tell you, I sniffed them, but there's probably been some that may have been wrong, and I just sniffed them if they had power, because usually the dryer was plugged in. So I assume, well, if the dryer's working, it must be right.
Yeah, and Doyle even states a wiggy or a sniffer is cheap enough to use to test 240. And I completely agree with that. My concern there is what that I had mentioned before. You're seeing if there's power going through, but you're not actually seeing if it's actually connected properly, if the ground's connected, hot, neutral, reverse, so on and so forth. So again, that's just something I think we need to really look at I think there's some clarification needs to be done there.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Next item, Education and Examination Division.
Good morning, everyone. Jennifer Wheeler, Director of Education and Exams. The first report I have before you is the Qualifying Education Provider and Course Application Report. You can see that we have year to date, we've received 43 qualifying inspector courses, and year to date, we've approved 26 of those inspector qualifying education courses. And the following report is regarding your continuing education providers and courses. And year to date, we have received 127 inspector continuing education courses, and we have approved 123 continuing education courses for inspectors. And if there are no questions, that concludes my report for you.
A question.
Sure.
So is that saying that there's 123 different courses available for inspectors?
Much more than that, actually. This is just what we've approved since September of 2019. So other courses.
There's that many providers that are there. There's that many courses out there for you to select from.
And then some. Yeah, that's right. So the courses, the continuing courses are approved for a 2-year term. So all of these courses continue to, and I can, if that's something you're interested in, I can pull up a report for you guys at the next meeting to let you know how many overall inspector CE courses are available.
And on the website, it does have a place to direct an inspector to his choices, right?
That's right.
So there's a plethora out there, yes. Okay.
Yeah, you can use that education tab to search approved courses. And through that drop down, you can search inspector CE courses. There are also filters so that you can search by course delivery method or the type of course. You can filter by looking through for the inspector legal and ethics course or a standards of practice review course or just general electives. So, playing around there, you can get an idea of the volume of currently approved inspector CE courses that are there. But if a number is something you're interested in, I can provide that for you at your next meeting.
No, matter of fact, I hadn't seen this new provider search engine you have.
And that's available for both qualifying and CE courses.
Keep in mind, Steve, a lot of those might actually be duplicates. You may have somebody who does a particular electrical course, but if it's done by multiple different providers, they're each submitting it for approval.
Yeah. About a quarter of the provider cities aren't even in Texas. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And those you'll find are mostly your online providers.
Okay.
Any other questions for me?
All right, we'll move on to licensing.
Thank you.
Good morning, committee. This is Denise Sample, the licensing director. And the first report I have for you is on page 8 of your materials. It's a fiscal year comparison of applications received and renewal activity. This is information captured from September through May of this year and comparing to the same period last fiscal year. So the bottom half of the report covers inspector applications received and inspector renewal activity. So we also bring in, as to compare the same group of license holders we show you fiscal year 20, 19 before that, and then on the very bottom right is fiscal year 18. And if there are no questions, that next report is the license holder and registrant status report. And this is a 13-month comparison of the total number of licenses. It breaks down active and inactive, and inspectors are there in the center. So you'll see the grand total of inspectors we have as of May is 4,269. And the next report is the one that Mr. Reinhardt had commented on earlier. This is just the total number of license holders. We are working on breaking that out to show you a graphical representation of the different license types. But this is just the grand total of licenses for all of TREC.
How many different licensors do you oversee?
Well, it's all the ones on the previous graph, the previous chart, excuse me, with brokers, individual and business entity, sales agents, the 3 different inspector license types, easement and right-of-way registrants as well, businesses and individuals are under TREC.
Okay.
Yeah. So the last report is the average number of calendar days to process an application. And this information shows right there in the center on the inspector applications, the average number of days it takes the licensing division staff to provide a response to an application or documents received. So this excludes the time it takes for the applicant to pass the fingerprint-based background check or the exam. And that concludes my report. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I will state just as a comment, I went through my renewal recently, and I have to say that this is the fastest that my renewals have ever been done through TREC. On all 3 different licenses that I have with y'all. It's really impressive the amount of work that you guys have done to really get that number down, and it's greatly appreciated.
Great, thank you for your comment.
All right, anybody else? All right, thank you, staff. Item number 7, discussion and possible action regarding the TREC Consumer Protection Notice. So we have, in your materials, you have 2 different versions of this. I kind of want to discuss this in 2 pieces. One, the addition that was made, which is done on both versions. And that addition starts with, please note, inspectors may limit liability through provisions in a contract or inspection agreement with a client. Please be sure to read any contract or agreement carefully. If you do not understand the terms or provisions of a contract or agreement, consult an attorney. So I want to just touch base on this wording first, because this is the wording that was added. We'll talk about the fact that there's 2 different forms here in a second. I just kind of want to be a little linear about this. Anybody have any comments about that verbiage that's there?
This is Sean Emmerich. I personally just think we're just getting, I'm just not sure how much hand-holding we need to do or we're responsible to do as far as our notification. We already notifying them that we're required to carry insurance. Are we going to continue to just add on to this, letting the consumer know everything that inspectors might do in Texas? I just think it's the commissioner, when we met with the commissioner last month, I think he brought to light really a lot of doubt about some of this stuff anyways, and I'm just not sure we need to add this.
Well, ironically enough, that's who this is coming from. It's from, this verbiage really came from staff and through input from that commissioner. And the reason this is kind of coming about is because the question has come up as far as, we've been talking about insurance for a long time. There's been an argument that's been going on for some time. And at first, we just put in that little blurb right above it, the real estate inspectors are required to maintain E&O. But Commissioner Turner had brought up a valid point that some inspectors may still be limiting their liability beyond what's required in subchapter G. So you wanted to make sure if we're going to modify this, that we're going to do it in such a way that we only have to do it once. That a consumer understands that an inspector may limit their liability so long as it doesn't conflict with the state statute in their inspector agreement. So I found this to be kind of a good balance between the two arguments of really delving into the insurance side of things and starting to play with the numbers as far as raising limits or anything like that, as opposed to just really over clarifying with consumers where they stand and what their options and what their rights are. That's kind of how I saw it.
And Lee, this first one is just for inspectors. So this, if that's the choice, then there would be two of these, one for us and one for everybody else.
No, wait. That's why I said we're taking this in two pieces.
No, but I mean, this first one is that option, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Sorry, Sean, you were starting to say something else.
Well, I just we were listening to the commissioner, I think he really put a lot of doubt that that inspectors might, I thought he was really calling into question that we do have the ability to limit through that, and that nothing's really been proven otherwise. And that there was one point where he talked about not even putting this stuff in there.
Right.
I just think it's been a 2-year thing that was brought up, and it never really probably should have ever been brought up. It was just brought up. There was a problem with our insurance and inspectors limiting that, and then it just kind of snowballed, and then it got reduced down to, well, we're sorry, we really shouldn't have brought this up. Let's just change this to this. I mean, I don't think anybody's being harmed. We all have insurance. People can, insurance requires us to do stuff, and let the courts decide if there's a problem. Because as of now, I don't see we're getting a bunch of complaints.
Lee, can I
go ahead, Tony?
I just want to mention that the reason why, Sean, just to clarify why Commissioner Turner mentioned not putting it in there in the first place was because what he was concerned about was that language being misleading. If you just leave it as it was originally drafted, which is inspectors have to carry this liability insurance, and there's no indication anywhere that they can limit it, he was concerned that is misleading because it gives the impression that there's this ability to get coverage for $100,000 when in fact inspectors can limit that to the cost of the contract. I'm not the contract of the service. So he said, if you're going to put it in there, you need to clarify that in fact inspectors have this ability. Otherwise, it's misleading language. That was his big take on whether or not to keep it in there or not. And just to be clear, the language about consulting an attorney is also in the preamble of the inspection report. That says if there's anything in the contract that you don't understand. So that's taken from that. The only additional language that would be put in this is actually an indication that then inspectors are able to limit their liability. So in terms of notifying the consumer, if I may don my consumer protection hat, I think language like this is actually beneficial to them because it gives them the fuller picture of what to expect.
But I mean, how many times are we going to, are we notifying them that brokers are required in some certain instances to carry errors and omissions? I mean, how many times are we going to notify them of this? And I thought that the commissioner at one point said, or don't put anything in there at all.
Well, and again, that was if you were going to leave the language as is. I think, and I don't want to speak for Commissioner Turner, but I think if his preference would be to put something in there clarifying it and letting consumers know kind of up front that this is a possibility. But I think if you weren't going to include that second portion of it, then I think, yeah, that's why he's like that. I would not even want to change it because it's misleading to put it in there. Again, I don't want to speak for him. That's just my impression of where he's going from.
I just came away from that meeting just thinking this has been a waste of time for 2 years. And I'm just not sure we need to take any action at this point.
It is something that's been going on for quite some time. I think that from where all this started, this is a pretty amicable compromise and resolution to the original problem. I think part of the original problem is also that we're required to have errors and omissions insurance, but there were inspectors that in their agreement was limiting the liability, and that limit of liability was in direct conflict with the state statute. And that kind of came about later on. That wasn't the original issue, but that discussion came about, and I think that ends up being the one issue that we have to address. And I think this verbiage kind of addresses that issue to keep that from happening, or to make sure that a consumer doesn't just blow over, glaze over that inspection agreement, that they actually read it. I mean, you can put in the agreement all day long, but somebody will say they didn't do it. But if you put another thing out there that says, hey, don't forget to actually read that agreement, it's from the consumer side, you're giving them multiple areas of saying, hey, make sure you read everything that is in front of you before you sign it. Granted, it shouldn't be our job to babysit people, but if we can put it out there as much as possible, if somebody ever tries to come back on us and say, hey, we didn't know that this was in that agreement, we have multiple areas where we can go back and say, look, you signed the agreement, plus there's a whole notice that says whatever agreement you signed that we can limit our liability. I mean, it kind of puts it back on the consumer at that point if they choose not to read the report and whatnot. Before I go to anybody else, Randall Needham has his hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Randall.
Randall, you're muted.
Randall, can you unmute yourself? All right, well, we'll let Randall figure that out. Randall said he can't unmute himself. Is that something you have to do, Tony?
No, I'm not able to unmute. The people calling in need to do it. There's a little bar on the video that you can unmute by hitting the mic.
Okay, Randall, if you can't unmute yourself, if you could just type your comments in that little chat window where I see you, we'll read them off for everybody to hear. In the meantime, Scott, go ahead.
So Leila, make sure I'm understanding what you were saying. I wasn't in that meeting, and I apologize. So by putting this notice in, it is allowing the inspector to say that they can limit their liability to the cost of the inspection because the client did not read the report entirely, because in the pre-part of the report, it states a lot of this about it. So is that what we're trying to help the inspectors to where, you get a little bogus claim and you just want it to go away and you just give them back their money and they sign a form and that's it?
Right.
Is that what we're trying to accomplish by having this wording in there?
I believe that is the intent, because that's what a lot of inspectors do. And I admit I do it myself. If it's something that falls under subchapter G, that we are, I messed up on the standards or something like that, okay, that's fine. That's what my E&O is for. But if somebody's saying 5 years down the line or 2 years down the line, hey, you missed that this outlet cover was broken, or we've all gotten those calls by little quirky stuff like that. If it's outside of subchapter G or anything that is not considered part of that, we can use our limits of liability to the cost of the inspection or whatever each person puts in there.
Okay, so that's what we're trying to allow the inspectors to, instead of contacting Trek and it's kind of a bogus thing and then try to keep them from giving you a bad review, here, give them back some money, go down the road and keep it from going all over the place, because it doesn't really relate to the subchapter G in our process. So that's what we're trying to accomplish, correct?
I think sorry, go ahead, Tony.
No, I don't want to interrupt you, Lee. I just wanted to make a comment on that, but go ahead. I apologize.
I just think this is an extra clarification to the consumer that even though we are required to have E&O, there are situations where we can limit the liability, and those situations are going to be spelled out in the inspection agreement, and to make sure you read that inspection agreement. I think it's just an over clarification for the consumer.
Okay, so back to Sean's question, where Sean was saying, I know we've been at this for a couple years and everything else. So this is the wording that staff, attorneys, and everybody else is trying to put in here so we can be done with that. Is that what everybody's agreed on the wording except for we have to vote it in?
Correct.
Okay. Tony answer? Go ahead now. I want to hear what Tony had to say.
I just wanted to say that I want to clarify that this is not saying that giving permission for inspectors to put the language in their contract, that's something they do already. It's not something. It's not something the commission is giving approval to one way or another. With the knowledge that that's in the contracts, what the thought was is to clarify this for consumers. And remember, and I'm not trying to be patronizing here, that the committee's job is consumer protection. So to the extent that this is not in fact doing any significant harm, and I'm not saying it is or isn't, I'm just saying to think about this, this is not doing any significant harm to inspectors to include this in the consumer report, yet it adds an extra layer, if you want to even say belts and suspenders, to a consumer in terms of notifying them up front what is possible. I think that's well within kind of the role of the committee to determine.
Okay. So what are our differences between this one and the other one, Lee?
Okay, so first, Randall states most consumers at this point in time know that any company has an agreement that has a disclaimer limiting liability. Absolutely agree. Like I said, this is just giving the consumer a little extra notice that most inspectors will do that. All right, so I just want to clarify, does anybody have any other comments just on the verbiage, not on the two different forms, but just on the verbiage of this? Okay, so now we have two forms here, and the thought, it was brought up at the last meeting that we're starting to get possibly enough information that we may want to separate out between an inspector form and a broker form, or leave it as one. So though my personal opinion, I understand the possible need to split them up because of the amount of information that can be in there. I would recommend leaving it as one form, and that's one of the options that we have here. I would recommend leaving it at one form for the primary reason that most consumers are not going to see our consumer protection notice. Most of the time, most inspectors work out of their home, they're sole proprietors, their consumer protection notice is sitting on the back of their office door in a house that nobody's going to see. They can see it on their website, but how many people are actually going to go to the website and look? If this form actually gets seen, it's typically going to be seen in the broker's office, real estate agent's office, whatever the case may be. And I think if they're going to see that one form, if we leave it one consistent form, that no matter where they see it, it says the exact same things, I think that will protect us and protect the consumer a lot better, because then they aren't worrying, well, I saw this form, but I didn't see that form. I didn't see the information about the inspector stuff. Why didn't I see that? I think this gives us the best opportunity to make sure that the consumer gets the information that they're supposed to get by having just one form for all licensees. So with that, I'll open it up. Anyone? Tony, you're up.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry?
Doyle, you said read my comments, please, but I don't see your, oh, sorry. Caveat emptor. Doyle had mentioned caveat emptor, buyer beware on that. I apologize, Doyle. I didn't see that one-liner before. Oh, above that. Hang on.
Define the Latin.
Buyer beware. That's what I said.
Okay.
Oh, Doyle said we do have the right to limit. It's for the courts to litigate. And Doyle agrees that the currently discussed verbiage is satisfactory. I apologize, Doyle. I didn't see that as it kind of scrolled up above my window. Tony, were you starting to say something there?
No, I thought someone said my name. That's why I said it.
Okay.
I was just going to comment that you're right. This was brought in two different forms because the committee asked for that last time. I personally think you've raised some very valid issues with whether or not, if you made it just an inspector notice, most inspectors don't have offices. The ability for someone to see it in a real estate office is significantly better. So just in terms of my weighing in on that, I think those are all valid points.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I personally think if we have two of them, there's a chance of people not the wrong clients looking at the wrong one. I kind of like the idea of having just one document.
Okay. Anybody else?
I agree with one form. This is Sean.
Okay.
Kathy, I agree with one form too.
All right.
I
Doyle,
agree as well.
all right. Doyle states it should be standardized in a single form. All right. So with that, I'll entertain a motion that we can accept the verbiage and or in one form or whatever variation you may want to propose.
This is Scott. I'll make a motion.
What's your motion, Scott?
One form.
With the current verbiage that's there?
Yes, with the current verbiage that is there. Correct the spacing though.
Okay, that'll all be fixed, but stylized.
All right.
Those are non-substantive.
I got a second from Doyle on that. So is there any other discussion on this particular item? Hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Lee, do you mind if I just do a roll call on this just to make sure I have everyone's vote on for the
Absolutely.
record?
Sure.
Okay. Lee Warren,
Yay.
Sean Emmerich.
I'm against.
Okay. Scott Regan.
Yes.
Okay. Doyle Williamson.
He says aye.
Okay. Dave Motley.
Aye.
Okay. Steve Reinhardt.
Aye.
Mike Morgan.
Yes.
Okay. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ayes and 1 nay.
All right. Motion passes. We'll move on to item number 8.
Lee, I'm sorry, this is Vanessa. I'm going to just interject real quick. So we will have to do a slight tinker to a rule in order to make this change. I just want to give everybody a heads up. It's just going to change the form name, but you'll see it on the agenda at the next commission meeting.
All right. In changing the form name, will the link remain the same or will people need to redo the link on all their websites?
It's just the number.
Yeah,
it'll be in the rule.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's the rule. I believe, Lee, the way that works is the way we have the website worked up is we should be able to just upload it to that link, so it should be good to go.
I just wanted to make sure so that we weren't having to burden people with changing all their links in everybody's website.
I will do what I can to make sure that stays as easy as possible.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, item number 8, discussion and possible action regarding the following proposed amendments and new rule regarding inspector pre-licensing education requirements. And I won't read off all the individual ones there, but Tony, if you want to go ahead.
Do you want me to go through them before we take comments, or how do you want to handle this? I'm happy to do. There's very minimal changes based on the last set of rules you did. We did, as I mentioned earlier, Vanessa and I did talk to the governor's office. We got some questions back for them. We clarified them as well as made some minor changes to the rules based on some of their comments. And staff noticed some typos that I made some changes to that I need to talk to you guys about as well today.
All right, well, why don't you go ahead and go over the changes that we made, because I think everybody wants to make sure that we were in compliance with what the governor's office was asking us to do, and then we can take comments at that time.
And I will ask Vanessa to weigh in if I missed something, because I'm liable to do that. But okay, so the very first change that you'll notice is on, what's that? I was going to say on, can you guys see my screen? So on 208, there's a reference to under, what section is this? H, and it's H, it references I2 and I1. Those are based on the old rules. We had modified this rule and I was removed and it was renumbered. So really what that should say is A should say must submit evidence of completion of this required coursework as provided under this subsection and remove I2 because it's really subsection H. And the same thing for B, it should say is not required to complete coursework outlined under this subsection. Those are non-substantive changes. They're just typos, but I just want to let you guys know that those would need to be changed. And then down below, there's still a reference to the old title of the courses, Building Science Module 1 and 2. The titles of those is really Property Building Inspection Module 1 and Property Building Inspection Module 2. So those would need to be changed as well. But those are minor changes, or non-substantive changes, I should say. And then the first change based on the discussion with the governor's office is in, I don't know why I was doing that. Okay, is that 213? So in 213, under the ability to teach the practicum, I believe, we, for some reason, when we talked about the requirement, and I believe Roy brought this up last time, and for some reason we dismissed it, and I apologize, Roy, for this. We had not included the ability to perform an option to someone to have performed 200 real estate inspections as a Texas professional inspector as being one of the options to teach the practicum. So we included that. We put that back into the rule because those are the requirements for sponsoring and currently the requirements for teaching the ride-along course. So for some reason we carved that out. And again, I apologize to Roy. He brought it up at the last meeting and staff said, oh, no, those are different requirements. Well, when we went back and looked, they actually were the right requirements. So those were added. And then the last change based on the governor's was adding this experience credit language. And it's to that gives the commission the ability. It's not mandated, but the authority to award credit for education required under subsection D and E to an applicant, and then it spells out the experience related there. That was part of the previous or the current rules, and the governor's office felt that there needed to be the ability for the commission to award credit based on experience needed to be included in these rules moving forward. So that was added as well. And I believe outside of renumbering things, those are the only changes made to the rules based on what you saw at the last meeting.
Okay. Anybody have any comments on that?
I can't tell if I'm unmuted.
You're on.
Tony, does this mean that if all of these are acceptable, that this now goes forward? I'm sure you'll go over the timeline, what happens here.
Yeah, it would then go to the commission for adoption. Because both of these changes are broader in scope than narrow, they can go forward with the changes, and it could be recommended for adoption if the commission is okay. The committee is okay with these changes.
Sorry to interject. I will say we still need to wait on a final response letter from the governor's office, which they know the date of our August meeting, and they're hoping to get us a letter. So I can't guarantee yes, but these changes go in the direction that they were indicating.
So when we approve these changes, or the commission approves these changes, will that final product then go before the state for acceptance?
Yeah, so what should happen is we should, after today, we'll send the results of this meeting over to the governor's regulatory compliance division. They will do their thing, finish up, hopefully give us a letter that says you are good to go, or you are good to go with these minor edits. And then we'll take that then at that point we have the all clear from them to move forward at the commission meeting to go with adoption of the rules, and they'll be legit and real.
And so adoption at the
August meeting, right?
And what's the best case scenario for adoption at that point?
Well, then you'll be adopted because they're out for proposal right now. So long as the governor signs off on those and the commission, votes to move forward with them, then you're done.
So the effective dates that we're looking at in March of the spring would be acceptable and workable. Yes.
That would be, yes, those would be the if adopted by the commission, those effective dates would be the effective dates of the rule. Yes, sir.
Okay. It's been so long. I got to review what changes we made and what's happening. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, we went back a few times, but this got proposed at the last commissioners meeting. It's been open for comments for the last 2 months. And it's up for the actual adoption at the August meeting. So we're on the kind of the last leg. We just, in this last little bit here, these changes, we don't have to re-propose them because they were non-substantive changes. So we can use the original proposal that was made, make the small changes, and still keep them up for adoption in the August meeting, and then it's done.
I just forgot. I mean, some people have asked, well, what change is this going to make and how many hours? It's been so long. I got to go back and reread it and make notes.
It knocks 200 hours off of the professional inspector substitute experience track.
Yes.
And the bigger thing outside of that, Steve, if you recall, is it provides some consistency because all the modules will be, the courses will be divided into modules with topics and things lined out. So from one provider to another, there should be some consistency in the way the education is provided.
And I'm believing that the providers really thought that this would eventually go through, so they've probably been working on restructuring their training, because that was the worry in the beginning that we were going to drop it too quick and they needed to do it. But now they've had 2 years from the time they had a kind of general overview of what was going to happen. So,
well, I know anecdotally some of them have been working on it, but I can't speak for all of them.
yeah, well, the ones that really wanted to. Yeah. Okay, good. So would you just need us to vote on those changes?
Yeah, I want to make sure we get everybody the opportunity to comment on that, though. I believe Stan Harbuck is on the line and wanted to comment on this particular agenda item, if memory serves.
Okay, I need to stop sharing my screen because Amber needs to pull something up.
Okay.
Go ahead, Amber.
Can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you, Stan.
Oh, sorry. I have to apologize for not offering my video today. I made a big mistake. I cut my own hair. So anyway, but anyway, so the quick things here are, let's see, she has up, if we could look at page, let's see, because we're looking at the description of the courses here, correct? Like the required courses, we're already past the exam issue, correct? And are we going through this by rule, or are we going through all of it all at once?
We're going through all of it all at once, and what she's done is she has pulled, I don't know if you can see it, but she's pulled up on the screen the comments that you submitted to the committee.
Okay,
and
great.
And the summary of points in the comments and supporting documents, those 4 items.
So I'll only have 3 minutes on 8A through E, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, very good. Then if we could go to page 19, I think that would be instructive. By the way, while she's doing that, just to mention that there's some new data, actually it was out before, but I submitted it here again, that shows that the data from the licensing and so forth shows that there's a significant restriction in the number of people that are able to get licensed with an in-person ride-along, which also would carry over to a similar practicum in-person requirement. But I'll let you go through that new data in the comments if you'd like. So this happens to be page 19. It's not coming up, is it, for some reason, huh?
Dan, if you could just bear with Amber, the comments you sent were 241 pages, and she's got to scroll through and find what you're looking for. So
it's the original. It's the original. The first one, I think it's called the presentation.
So it's it is
document, which she's in already. But going to page 19 is where we need to get. Sorry.
She's on page 19.
Oh, is she?
Yeah, if you look
I'm
at the
not
top of the screen, it says 19 of 241.
Oh, okay. I don't see that on my screen, but anyway, that's not the right page. That's the wrong page. But I'll go ahead and just talk about it. If any of you can get to page 19 on that first PDF at some point, that's fine. It is a list of moving the hours for better understanding, and that is. For better effectiveness in the, I've mentioned before about how we need a few more hours in some of the categories for the property and building inspection modules, because they just seem to require it based on number of pages that are in the new NHIE manuals. I brought that up before, and I just wanted to say that if you and yet we have what seems like an overload of hours amongst the other categories, such as analysis, the other two modules, analysis, of reporting, and then also professional responsibility and so forth, and also in the Texas standards, the Texas related topics as well. And there's a chart that's on page 19 that shows that if you were to add a significant number of hours to the property inspection modules, the appropriate categories that better match the percent of pages in the NHIE manual, you would be able to see that the
Okay, Stan, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you're at your 3 minutes. I'll give you a very, very quick moment to kind of wrap that up, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry. For some reason, it's not coming up on the screen that's being shared. But if you can go to page 19, it'll show you how that ends up actually being only 1 hour more net over what the the current recommendations are. If you switch those around, and I think that better balances the courses. And then I also have it near the very end there on page 28, a breakdown of the hours. I know I've mentioned before about how grandfathering in would be helpful. It actually breaks down the hours and how many hours a person who's completed the 130-hour and 2-hour courses actually satisfies all the hours under your new proposed requirements, and grandfathering them under the NHIE related courses. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anybody else who'd like to make comments on agenda item number 8? What was that, Tony?
I thought someone had raised their hand earlier, but I don't see the hand raised anymore. So.
Oh, it was Mark. It was a straight click, he said.
Okay.
All right. With that being said, I'll entertain a motion on agenda item number 8.
I recommend that we accept the modifications or the changes to, I believe we're talking all 5 of the sections noted under agenda 8 for forward to the full commission.
All right. Motion made by Steve Reinhardt. Do I hear a second?
Scott, I second.
Second by Scott. Any other discussion on this item? Hearing none. Tony, if you want to do the roll call on that.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Lee Warren?
Aye.
Sean Emmerich?
Aye.
Scott Regan?
Aye.
Doyle Williamson?
He says aye.
Okay. Dave Motley?
Aye.
Steve Reinhardt?
Aye.
Mike Morgan?
Aye.
Okay. It's 7 ayes and no nays.
All right. Motion passes. Item number 9, update regarding an inspector's ability to perform sewer line inspections. Tony?
So, yeah, I just wanted to let the committee know, I know there's been a lot of discussion about this one since the AG's opinion came out, and I'll happily defer to Vanessa to correct me if I'm wrong, but the AG's opinion did not outright what am I trying to say? It did not outright dismiss, for lack of a better term, the plumbing rule. It gave direction that it could be challenged, and so the plumbing board is working on that. That rule does not go into effect until after September 1st. So in terms of our feelings here at the agency is, we don't want to weigh in on anything right now while that rule is still in effect, because it's still the guiding principle, if you will, until it's changed. The SOP committee is weighed in a little bit on this, but they haven't, they're doing some significant more research on it to determine whether or not there is anything they want to recommend on it. But as of right now, we're really in a holding pattern. I mean, we can work on any proposed language or changes that the committee wants to recommend at that point, but really, there's not anything we can do officially until that plumbing rule is changed.
Okay. I'm just as a side note, I know we're getting along in this meeting, but if you're not speaking, if you could please mute yourself. We're getting a lot of background noise, typing, and people fiddling with things. That'd be greatly appreciated. All right.
Yep. Lee, this is Sean Emmerich. Yeah, we spoke about this in the SOP subcommittee meeting, and we're doing more research and everything like that. And we're going to try to put together a recommendation to the full committee, at least our subcommittee's stance on this, and if we want to incorporate it in the SOPs.
Okay. Sounds good. Anybody else have anything to provide on item number 9?
This is Steve.
Okay.
So is the goal to either endorse or not endorse the ability to do the sewer scopes, or is it just to make the determination that it's outside the scope of TREC, like many other things we do?
I think that's still actually the question where everybody's trying to answer. I think there are some inspectors that have been doing it, and the plumbing board had been stating previously that unless you were a licensed plumber, you weren't allowed. And so there was some clarification that came down from the AG's office in regards to that. I believe what they stated was that basically, well, like Terry said, they weren't really overly clear, but
They did not overturn the rule. They said it could be challenged. So the rule's still in effect, and the plumbing board is currently changing that rule, but it's still in effect right now. So in terms of the legality of doing that, it's still on the the agency and the committee's take on that has always been you have to be a licensed plumber to do it, and that's what that rule currently states. And it has not changed and will not until after September 1st, is what the plumbing board told me.
I mean, it's similar to a home inspector doing electrical work. It's outside the scope of us. It's under another agency, and it would probably be a long list of things to try to say what inspectors can't do. It's more of what inspectors can do, and we have no control over it.
Well, and what the rule would typically, what their change is right now it's defined as doing plumbing, which requires a license if you scope a sewer line with a camera. They're removing that section of the definition. So it will no longer be, you will not have, the definition of plumbing will not include scoping a sewer line with a camera. So it's not required that you be licensed as a plumber anymore once that rule changes to do that work.
But I guess my question is, if it is in the scope or not in the scope of another agency, is it TREC's position to make a determination on whether or not they can do it?
No, I think the thought was, Steve, that if in fact inspectors are doing this, is it worthwhile for the committee to weigh on some possible minimum standards and to do it? And that's what the SOP committee's investigating right now, whether or not they want to even go down that road or not. It may be exactly as you say that the SOP committee will recommend to the full committee to not go down that road, and it's just considered outside the scope. Or they may in fact come in and say, well, this is enough of a kind of an issue that we want to lay out some basic standards for it. That's all up in the air still, right?
And we had talked on the SOP committee years ago about how many other things that inspectors do that are not even controlled by other agencies. And probably the most common is something like infrared. Well, it's not really covered. It's not under any other agency. And everybody does it, but we don't address it because it's not one of our things.
I think the distinction, if there is one here, is that you can do damage to a line by scoping it, whereas I don't know what kind of damage you can do through infrared. I mean, if you can, I don't know, but there is.
Other than misdiagnosis
Right.
causing a lot
Right.
of grief for
Right.
buyers and sellers.
And as of right now, I think the leaning toward is just, you need to make sure that you're what's the word I'm looking for? You're competent enough to do this. But again, the SOP committee is looking into whether or not they want to go down that road or not.
Okay. I'm good with that.
All right. Anybody else on item 9? Okay, moving forward. Item number 10, discussion and possible action regarding display of alternate addresses on the TREC website. Tony?
Yeah, Vanessa's going to weigh in on or discuss that one.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Okay, so we did a search, and we're not seeing a rule requirement or statutory requirement to post those on the website. They are public information, so if someone were to request your addresses, we would have to release them. But actually, what this brings up is a little bit of a bigger discussion at the agency itself. About what gets posted on the website in terms of people's contact address, and I think there's thoughts on all ends. I understand the inspector perspective of a lot of you guys are using your home addresses, which is different than a business address. So what I can do with this is take it as part of a bigger sort of agency discussion. It's not really something that you guys would recommend in terms of at the committee level, but what I can do is I can take everything that you guys have mentioned and my research on what's required, what's not required, how many public information requests would we anticipate getting if we took it off, things like that, and present that at the agency level, with the executive group to look into this topic. I think we're seeing it from different groups. So that's, as in terms of like a formal committee recommendation, you wouldn't really make one to the commission, but I can take your perspective and take it at the agency level, if that's helpful.
Yeah, if you could, and I guess, I kind of brought this one up. I'd love to see it to where we don't have to put our home addresses on anything, but I understand from a legal perspective, we have to have the address in case somebody wants to serve us. You can't serve a PO box, so I completely understand that. But my big thing was I just don't like that information readily available on the website for any Joe Schmo to see. I don't mind if I can list my PO box on there, so if somebody wants to mail me something, that's fine. But like I said, when it comes to inspectors, because most are sole proprietors, I just don't feel comfortable having inspectors' home addresses thrown out all over there where people can just come knock on our door whenever they feel like it.
Yeah, and I think those are all really valid points, and I've noted them, and I've actually kind of started this conversation already. I can let you know where it goes, right? But I will voice all of those concerns on your behalf, and I understand. You guys are in a little bit of a unique position too. I think the way that you office is different than some of our other license holders, things like that. So I'll bring that forward, on the committee's behalf. It'll just be at the agency level, not at the commission level.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a question there, Lee, too.
Sure.
In just kind of a side note, because I look myself up here, what is the easiest way to update information? Like mine, if you look me up, it's still showing me with 4 apprentices. Been there for years, and I don't know how to fix those things.
Denise, can you weigh in on that?
Yeah, I was quickly trying to locate the form. There should be a form, but with the inspector sponsorship changes, I believe that an email is also sufficient, but if you give me just a moment.
I mean, when one of my apprentices gets their professional license, I guess I would think that it would disappear off of my apprentice list.
It's not automatic.
It's not automatic.
I figured that. I found that out, but I didn't know it was I didn't know the avenue for me to try to clean up my presentation on the inspector search.
Denise is looking for a form or seeing if it's an email, but yeah, it's on the.
I don't recall right away if it's all done in the same form. Yeah, there's a termination of sponsorship form. It's the same one you use to add, an apprentice under your sponsorship. So you would just check the box to terminate the relationship.
And it's on you to complete that process, Steve.
Right, as the former sponsor.
So even though they're still an employee and they still list our company as their business address and under my DBA,
that's separate.
They would disappear from my apprentice inspector sponsored list.
Right, if they're no longer apprentices that are sponsored by you. That's correct.
And the reason would be not that I fired them, but they got their license.
Correct.
And maybe that's something we could do a short blurb in a future insight, just explaining how to remove a sponsored apprentice, just to make sure that those who are sponsoring know that it's on them to go through that process to let us know that they need to move.
Yeah, and I think you ought to, in the advisor, I said, just tell everybody, search themselves and look and see. There'll be people are amazed they don't realize. And I see some that have 2 or 3 DBAs and they have alternate names, which I don't understand that. What's the difference between an alternate and a DBA?
And an alternate name would be a license holder who, maybe is named James and goes by Scooter. So it's not an easy assumption like a Jimmy or, a common nickname.
You thinking about going by Scooter, Steve?
I've got a long laundry list of things I've been called. I was just gonna pick the top 10 and maybe put them in there. Yeah, no.
I think that just made his list.
Well, I do think that every inspector should look themselves up, and they'll probably be surprised what they might find. They think they have DBAs, they don't, or they've got people associated with them that are not anymore, and it's just something they need to do, and they're sitting at home right now anyway. Yeah.
If nothing else, it's good for them to go in and make sure that they're getting credit for the education that they've taken, because they can see that on the website. So it's a good way to find out if your credit hours are actually showing up like they're supposed to.
And I do appreciate Trek updating and giving me credit for meetings and stuff. That all pops up, and I forgot all about it.
Randall Needham had said TDLR already holds addresses this for other professions. So I'm assuming he means that they don't give them out public or have them publicly on their website. I'm assuming he means that they hold on to them. So.
Right, and we do that as well. We need to figure out in terms of agency wide what every agency has a different approach to things. So.
Yeah, TDLR just gives you a license number, expiration, type, and that's it.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else on item number 10? All right. Item number 11, request for future meeting agenda items. Anybody have anything they'd like on a future agenda? No, nothing?
On mute. This is Sean. I shared with you that email that an inspector had sent me.
Oh, Sean, you broke up.
Who did you share?
Lost you, Sean.
Did he send it to me? Do you recall an email from Sean Lee?
I do not, but I've slept since then.
Yeah, and I just got back from vacation, so my brain is a bit atrophied. Let me see. Go ahead, Lee. I'll see if I can find that.
Okay. Anybody else have any items for future agenda?
This is Mike. May I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay. A while back, I brought up the fact that of the handwritten sponsorship forms where you've got to do your 200 inspection log. And somebody was going to look into a better way to do that without having to handwrite 200 inspections. Is there any progress with that?
Oh, that's probably a question best for what, Jennifer?
For Denise.
Denise, sorry.
Tony, correct me if I'm wrong. I think the last time we talked about this, we checked the rules, and they're not required. You're not required to actually submit your inspection logs using our form. And when we pulled it up on the website, I think we tried on various different browsers. It is a fillable PDF, so it shouldn't be required for someone to print it out and handwrite all of those inspections.
Okay, but even a fillable PDF you have to fill in 200 inspections, copying and pasting.
Right, and what we discussed was if you have it tracked, on your own spreadsheet on Excel or something like that, and all the information that we're requesting in that log is listed, that should be fine and should be acceptable.
And Mike, to the extent that we have not clarified that anywhere on the website, we will do so. I apologize.
Okay, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is because, we've called up to the front office and they said, yeah, you have to fill enough of them out to show 200 inspections. So it just needs to be communicated that, I guess, everybody who's answering the phone and answering the questions.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that back up. I apologize that we dropped the ball on that one, but we'll circle back around and get that figured out and fixed and put some info on the website about it.
All right,
and
thank you.
And inform the people on the phones as well.
All right, thanks.
All right, did we get Sean back?
Yeah, I'm right here.
There you
Did
go.
you get me yeah, I just wanted to put on the agenda. I'd emailed you that email from that inspector that sent me with concerns about some software that's being used.
Oh, yeah. You're right.
In Texas, there's some concerns about the way the truck report is being delivered, and if the consumer is able to easily see and find that report, the truck report, before they see the summary.
So are they? Let me ask you this, Sean. Is this because this has come up before, where software companies will have their own version, kind of a report that they use in other states? Because Texas is the only one, I believe, with its own report form.
Yeah.
And then they just attach the Texas one on as an attachment or kind of a secondary thought, and they consider that being in compliance. But I believe we weighed in on that before and said that you can't do that. So,
this is a newer software. It's been out probably a couple of years. A lot of people are switching to it in Texas. It's pretty high tech or whatever. It's more advanced than a lot of the stuff that's out there right now. But the consumer gets the initial email they get is basically a summary of all the problems, and it looks real flashy and everything. You can interact with it, but it's very difficult to find the correct report. You have to go to several different attachments and links and stuff like that.
Can you send me that email too? And then Lee, if you're cool with that, we can add that to the next agenda and figure out if there's something that we can present to you guys to discuss on that.
No, absolutely. Mr. Malloy had his hand raised.
I just wanted to comment that in the past when we've had software providers contact us, we've told them that the report, the standardized report, needs to be the first thing presented to them, and then any kind of supplemental flashy type of stuff or whatever needs to be, thereafter. I mean, the report needs to come first, so that's what we've always given advice. I don't know about this company, but that's what we've always standardized our response to.
Well, I sent Lee some links and stuff like that, and I can get with Tony and show him, but you definitely don't see you have to hunt around, and it's pretty hard to find the truck report.
Okay.
Well, and when I've attended these inspector committee conferences, I've had software people come up and ask me that very question: can we just attach the truck form but have this one be first? And I've said no. So.
Yeah. Lee.
Sean Doyle is asking the name of the software, so if you can get that to him, and I'll get back with you, Steve. Eddie had your hand up.
Yes, sir. Isn't the truck report itself a summary to begin with?
No.
I thought it would be. In general, it's a summary of what's wrong with the house, to begin with.
Not in the definition that we're talking here. I mean, there's a lot of inspectors that'll put a summary, after the report to summarize the information that's spelled out in the report, but I wouldn't consider the report itself a summary.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Steve?
I brought this up with Mark Moore about over a year ago, and actually gave him a sample inspection. I just forwarded to you, Lee, the email. And he consulted with Mike and Tony there at the office. And basically what I was told in the email that, yeah, the intent was that you could add things, but he said the rule does not address the format or contents or otherwise prohibit this. And that was what I got from Mark about a year ago.
Which Tony did he send it to, Steve? Did he send it to me?
No, I'm sorry. Renteria?
Yeah.
Renteria, yes.
Yeah, that's Renteria.
So Mark is saying he consulted with Mike Malloy and Tony Renteria, and although it wasn't the intent, because what this inspection has, and like I say, I sent a copy to you, Lee, it kind of has this other third-party software, and then the Trek report shows up like page 50. And it's in full content, but it's like 50 pages into the report, wow. which is kind of, like they say, it wasn't the intent, but maybe need to address, the intent, because his last sentence, his last few words in the first paragraph, he says it otherwise doesn't prohibit it the way I read it. And guys are doing it.
Yeah, I think that might be a misinterpretation, but we'll look at it. I believe there is to use the lack of a better term, a primacy of that initial of the report. But I could be wrong.
All right, real quick, and I'll get right back to you, Mike. I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole because this is an item we're talking about, future agenda items. So I don't want to get into too much description of this because this topic was not posted for the public. So if you have a quick comment, Mike, that's fine, but I don't want to get too far into this discussion.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say, I use this software and it can be modified where when you send it out, the PDF is the first thing seen. So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, so yeah. Okay. All right, so I think it's a good item that we should have on the next agenda, so I agree with that.
Lee, who was that, Mike that spoke just now?
Yes, Mike Morgan.
This was Mike, yes.
Okay,
Mike.
Can you shoot me an email? Mike, can you shoot me an email? That way we can work on this before the next meeting.
Who am I talking to?
Sean Emmerich.
Who's talking to me? Sean, yeah, Sean. Okay, sure.
Okay. Anybody else have any other items for future agenda? Okay. Future meeting dates, number 12. What are we looking at, October? Tony?
Yeah. Vanessa, when is the next one?
It's right there. So the suggested date, which would fall within sort of your normal range, would be Monday, October the 12th, with alternate dates of the 13th or the 15th.
I'm good with the 12th.
12th's a holiday.
I was just going to say, when's the federal holiday?
It may not be by that time.
Oh, Lord, that's a whole different discussion. I can't do the 13th. I could do the 15th.
This is Scott. I'm actually out the 13th till the 18th.
What about the 9th?
Let me look. Hold on.
I mean, I'm good with the 12th. We don't do holidays.
Yeah, 12th worked for me.
I think we've met on Columbus Day before in the past.
Is it one of those optional days with Trek?
I believe we're
Not
here.
even a day. Yeah, it's
I believe we are here. We're not out of the office. I can't remember the last time I had Columbus Day off.
Oh, then I'd be okay with leaving it on the 12th.
Yeah. I was worried that you would be doing something on a day off.
No, we should all be here.
Okay.
Let's make it a
We're
party.
off of this.
Everybody okay with the 12th?
Yep.
All right. All right. So 12th at what, 10 a.m. All right.
And until further notice, it's likely that the meeting will be done remotely.
Oh, I think this works well. I can see everybody's face.
We're a little rusty early on, but that's only because it's been a while. So
Yeah. I don't get kolaches, once a quarter now, so that's a little rough, but we'll deal with it.
Lee mutes when he hits the bag of nuts.
That's exactly right. I try to be considerate of everybody else. All right. With that, I think we are good. All in favor of adjourning or entertain a motion to adjourn at 11:47?
So moved.
Like that motion.
Yeah, that was made. I heard Sean make that. I think we are good. Meeting is adjourned at 11:47.
thank you, everybody, very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.